If you look closely at the modern map of the Arctic, or the deep ridge lines of the Southern Ocean, you begin to notice a strange quietness in the data. It is not that we lack information. In fact, we have never measured these remote spaces with such agonizing precision. Satellite sweeps, seismic echoes, and deep-bore temperature readings stream into our databases every millisecond. Yet, there is a lingering sensation that the maps we are looking at are not descriptions of the world as it exists, but rather blueprints for a world we are desperately trying to lock in place before it slips away. We are living in the era of the pre-melt logic, a brief, hyper-rational window where science is being quietly reframed to serve a geography that is already losing its solidity. For centuries, sovereignty was a simple matter of dirt and stone. You built a wall, you manned a fort, or you charted a coastline, and the solid earth remained where you left it. But as the planet warms, the absolute distinction between land and water is beginning to dissolve. In response, a silent revolution is taking place within the halls of international law and marine science. Nations are no longer just measuring the current sea levels. They are claiming the rights to the ocean floors that lie beneath the ice, projecting their political wills onto muddy ridges and underwater plateaus that may not see the light of day for another century. This is what we might call submerged sovereignty. It is the practice of colonizing the future liquid state of the planet using the cold, rigid instruments of contemporary science. Consider the way we study glaciology today. It is rarely just about understanding the flow of water or the preservation of ancient atmospheres. Funding flows where the borders are threatened. Scientists are dispatched to drill deep into the ice shelves, not merely to read the past, but to establish a continuous physical presence. The scientific station becomes a proxy for a settlement, and the ice core becomes a title deed. The data itself is weaponized. If a state can prove that a submarine ridge is a natural prolongation of its landmass, it can claim exclusive rights to everything on and beneath that seabed. Under this logic, the search for empirical truth is subtly redirected. The hypothesis is no longer tested to be disproven. It is tested to defend a boundary line that exists only on paper. But there is a deeper, more unsettling realization waiting beneath this bureaucratic maneuvering. We have always assumed that science is a tool for adapting to change. We believe that by measuring the melting ice, we are preparing ourselves for what comes next. But the pre-melt logic suggests the exact opposite. We are using science to deny change. We are attempting to freeze the political and legal structures of the 19th century into the physical reality of the 21st. We are treating a dynamic, fluid Earth as if it were a static museum piece, carving up spheres of influence on ice sheets that are already structurally dead. The horror of this realization is that the more precise our measurements become, the more fragile our illusions appear. We are building highly sophisticated, multimillion-dollar research stations on platforms of ice that are actively separating from the bedrock. We are writing laws to govern territories that will be underwater before the treaties are even ratified. The science we rely on to guide us into the future has been conscripted into a rearguard action to defend a past that cannot be recovered. We are behaving like cartographers drawing borders on a wave, fully aware that the water is moving, yet pretending that our lines have the permanence of granite. In a quiet office in Geneva, or perhaps in a windowless room in St. Petersburg, a researcher looks at a high-resolution radar image of a northern coastline. The image shows a small gravel spit, barely a mile long, that has served as a territorial baseline for decades. The radar shows that the spit has disappeared, swallowed by a storm surge and the slow, relentless rise of the tide. Legally, the disappearance of this tiny patch of gravel should shift a national border by several dozen miles, changing who owns thousands of square miles of potential oil fields. But on the official charts, the spit remains. The data is corrected, smoothed over, or simply ignored. The map is preserved because the alternative is a terrifying kind of legal vertigo. We like to think of ourselves as creatures of the land, anchored by the stability of our institutions and the permanence of our geography. We watch the ice retreat on our screens as a distant, ecological tragedy, a problem to be solved by emissions targets and technological innovation. But we rarely stop to consider how much of our intellectual architecture is built on the assumption of a frozen world. We have tethered our laws, our economies, and our very understanding of nationhood to a physical reality that is rapidly liquefying. If the solid ground beneath our feet was only ever a temporary state of matter, what happens to the truths we built upon it when everything begins to flow?